Hello and welcome back to the Hazzabhajan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and today it is time for a follow-up video which I probably should have made in the immediate aftermath of my detailed history of Manchester City, of course my team, a few months ago, but it just never crossed my mind to actually make this video, so therefore, a few months too late, here is that follow-up video. I think the title speaks for itself really. It's just basically my opinion on Man City's all-time greatest 11, so of course the goalkeeper, defenders, midfielders and attackers. And I know that a lot of you will probably expect this team to be filled with players from the Sheikh Mansour era and with very few from other periods in the club's history, but actually that isn't really the case, because City have had many talented players ever since their foundation in 1880, so whittling it down to just 11 was actually quite a difficult task. Just to be clear, this isn't necessarily the team of the best players to have played for Man City at any stage in their career, but rather the best players at the club, or those who made the most impact at the club during their time at either Main Road, Hyde Road or the Etihad Stadium. So just as one example, Frank Lampard is probably one of the 3 or 4 best midfielders to have played for Manchester City, but of course his peak years came with Chelsea, and by the time he joined Man City he was around 36 and only stayed for a season, although he did do well in that season, but of course nowhere near good enough to warrant a place in this all-time 11. I hope that clears everything up, so without any further ado, here is my opinion on Manchester City's all-time greatest 11. Goalkeeper, Bert Trautmann. Perhaps the position in which Man City have had the most top quality players throughout its history, the likes of Frank Swift, Joe Corrigan, Harry Dowd and Emerson Moraes can all vie for the number 1 shirt, and if the Brazilian puts in more than a decade of high class service to the club, maybe he could take this position further down the line. However, even with the fierce competition for the goalkeeper slot, this decision was actually one of the easiest in the entire video, as Bert Trautmann stands head and shoulders above all others. Originally a prisoner of war upon arriving in England, he signed for City from St Helens Town in 1949 and went on to spend 15 years dominating his goal with his sharp reflexes, assured catching ability from crosses and fearless attitude, endearing him to not just the on-watching City fans but also the general public, playing his part in improving Anglo-German relations post-war. His most iconic moment was undoubtedly playing on after breaking his neck in the 1956 FA Cup final against Birmingham, which City went on to win 3-1. And if you want to learn more about Trautmann, I have an entire video dedicated to him, which I will leave in the description for those of you who haven't watched it already. Although he didn't win much at Man City, his overall impact to the club is something that can never be understated, so therefore he is the obvious choice for the goalkeeper position in my team. Right back, Tony Book. Pablo Zabaleta is bitterly unfortunate to miss out, as the Argentine's tenacity and warrior-like approach to games served City brilliantly for 9 years, but unfortunately he comes up against Tony Book, City's most successful captain prior to 2008. Despite not making a Football League appearance until the age of 30, Book was given a chance by Man City in 1966 when he was 31, and although manager Joe Mercer originally had doubts as to whether or not to sign him considering his age, his assistant Malcolm Allison, who had managed Book at Plymouth, reminded Mercer that he himself had made a move to Arsenal at around that age, which led to Book's signature being confirmed. Within a year, he was made club captain, and by 1970 he'd lifted the European Cup Winners' Cup, the League Cup, the FA Cup and the First Division, even winning the Football Rights Association Player of the Year award in 1969, despite only featuring for half of the season as a result of an Achilles injury which had ruled him out for the first 4 months of the campaign. A pacey fullback who had fantastic positional awareness and constantly got the better of a prime George Best, Book retired in 1973, becoming City manager the following year and guiding the club to a League Cup title in 1976, which would be their last major trophy until 2011. Centre-back, Vincent Kompany. The first player in this team to have played for the club in the 21st century, Kompany was actually bought by Man City from Hamburg for just £6 million a matter of days before the club was taken over by Sheikh Mansour's riches, and he was one of a select few players who managed to survive the transition. Although originally signed as a defensive midfielder, he made the transition to centre-back by 2010, and within a year of that, he had been installed as club captain, going on to lift 9 trophies over the course of the next 8 years, including 4 league titles. Kompany was a calm and composed defender who had brilliant tackling qualities and positional sense, and he was a man for the big occasions, scoring the winning goal in the 2012 Manchester derby to put City in pole position for the league that season, and blasting in a 30-yard thunderbolt against Leicester in 2019 to effectively hand City the Premier League title. If it weren't for injuries, he may well have gone down as one of City's top 3 players of all time, but there is no way that he is missing out on this team. Centre-back, Sam Cowan. Sam Cowan spent the same length of time at City as Vincent Kompany did, 11 years, and he is the third player in this team to have captained the club at some stage during his time with the Citizens. Cowan actually only started to play football at all at the age of 17, but within 6 years he had signed for Manchester City, and over the course of those 11 years at the club he was a virtual ever-present at the back, making 389 appearances in the league alone. Renowned for his heading ability, Matt Busby, the future Manchester United manager who was playing for City at the time, stated that Cowan could, quote, head a ball as far as most of us could kick it, close quote, and he was the first player to represent the club in 3 different FA Cup finals. Although he lost in 1926 and 1933, by that point as captain, he boldly stated to the Duke of York that, after that 1933 loss, City would return the next season to the FA Cup final and win it. And true to his word, in that 1933-34 season, Cowan finally got his hands on that FA Cup trophy after a 2-1 win over Portsmouth. He would leave the club the year after winning the FA Cup trophy, just 2 years before City won the league for the first time in their history. Left back, Glenn Pardoe. Famously, Man City have struggled with the left back position in recent times, but if they'd had the services of Glenn Pardoe at their disposal, they probably wouldn't have needed to chuck so much money at it in order to fix the problem. A one-club man, Pardoe holds the record as City's youngest ever player, making his debut at the age of 15 years and 312 days in 1962 in a league game against Birmingham, although he played up front in that game as he had done for most of his career at schoolboy level. His transition to left back came during the mid-1960s, and by 1966 he had established himself as a mainstay in City's side, featuring in all but one of City's games during their 1968 title-winning campaign, and even scoring the winning goal of the 1970 League Cup final against West Brom. However, a fracture in his right leg in October 1970 almost saw it amputated, although 2 years later he would return, but another fracture 4 years on, this time to his left leg, would force him to retire prematurely at the age of just 30. His versatility was such that, during his entire career at Maine Road, the only position he didn't play in at some stage was at centre back, and he rounds off our back four. Defensive midfield, Fernandinho. As tempting as it is to include the likes of Roy Poole, City's FA Cup winning captain in 1956, and Alan Oakes, City's all-time record appearance maker with 680 games across 17 years with the club, I've overlooked them both in favour of Fernandinho, who is the first player to be currently contracted to the club to feature in this team. Signed from Shakhtar Donetsk in 2013, Fernandinho slotted into defensive midfield perfectly upon his arrival, and like many great players in that position, his work went largely unnoticed for a good few years. I personally have been singing his praises ever since he joined, but it was only in the 2017-18 season, as City began their all-conquering era under Pep Guardiola, that he finally got the attention he deserved, as he became the figurehead in breaking up opposition attacks and setting City's forwards on their way. He even filled in brilliantly at centre-back last season, and he doesn't show signs of slowing down even at the age of 35, and I have no doubt that, once he leaves, his absence will be felt more on the pitch than any other. Central midfield, Colin Bell. Widely considered to be City's greatest player of all time, if there was any player who I'd kick myself for not including, it would be this man. Colin Bell was signed by the Blues in 1966 after Malcolm Allison, who'd scouted the midfielder whilst at Bury, told the press that he was awful and that no one should sign him, purely so that no one else would be convinced to put in a bid for him, leaving City unchallenged to sign the not at all awful midfielder. Over the next 9 years, Bell formed the legendary trident with Francis Lee and Mike Summerbee in City's formidable team of the late 1960s and early 1970s, renowned for his technical ability, his runs into the box from deep, and his stamina, the latter trait earning him the nickname Nijinsky after the famous racehorse. Not only that, but he is City's 4th highest goalscorer of all time with 152 goals to his name despite being a midfielder, and he would score all of them barring 3 between 1966 and 1975. Unfortunately, a leg break in 1975 ended his career at the highest level very prematurely, and he left Maine Road 4 years later, although he would continue to be involved with City after his retirement until his tragic death last month at the age of 74. Central midfield, David Silva. The other central midfield spot is a choice between 3 of City's best players of the last decade, in the forms of Yaya Toure, Kevin De Bruyne and David Silva, but as a result of Toure's dip in form post-2015 and De Bruyne only having spent 5 years at the club to date, my choice is Silva. His signing showcased City's newfound pulling power, as although they would only be competing in the Europa League in 2010-11, they could buy a player who had just won the World Cup with Spain amongst stiff competition, and over the next 10 years, El Mago was the creative hub of City's most successful era. His ball control, agility and vision allowed him to split defences with ease for a decade, and he left last year with many calls saying that he was City's greatest player of all time. Whilst I can't go that far, he is most certainly in the top 5. Right wing, Billy Meredith. City's first proper star player, whom I planned to make a video about for a while but never got around to doing just yet, Billy Meredith was the definition of a maverick player who entertained audiences with his ability on the pitch and avuncular nature off it. Signed from Northwich, Victoria in 1894, Meredith was made club captain just a year later, and by 1899 he was the focal point of City's attack as they won promotion to the First Division for the first time in their history, scoring 29 goals in 33 games in the league. Primarily an outside forward, his agility on the ball and crossing ability were both outstanding, but unlike many footballers of his era, he abstained from alcohol and tobacco and scheduled extra training sessions for himself in order to improve his game. His main gimmick was chewing on a toothpick during games, as well as chatting to spectators whilst the match was still going on, and although he left City under a cloud in 1906 after a match-fixing scandal, joining Manchester United no less, he would return to the Citizens at the age of 47, playing his last game in professional football in 1924, just 120 days short of his 50th birthday. Left wing, Eric Brook. As much as I don't want to leave out Mike Summerby, he did primarily play as a right winger rather than a left winger, and so with that in mind, it was a choice between Roy Clark and Eric Brook, and I've just edged towards the latter. Despite being an outside left, Brook was City's all-time top goal scorer until a certain player who is about to feature next overtook his tally in 2017, as he netted 177 goals in 494 games for the club, only falling below the 10-goal a season mark once between 1928 and 1939. He fired the club to an FA Cup title in 1934, as well as the First Division title in 1937, a season in which he hit 20 goals for the first and only time with the club, and his left foot was described as one of the most ferocious in the game. He has been ranked in Man City's top 10 players of all time by publications such as The Times and the Manchester Evening News, and so with that in mind, he probably does have to feature. Striker, Sergio Agüero. From the outset, this is probably the most obvious choice in the entire squad, but we cannot neglect the other incredible strikers that City have had over the years, including the likes of Francis Lee, Tommy Johnson, Don Revie, Dennis Stewart and cult hero Sean Gota. Having said that, City's all-time top scorer was always going to feature, as Sergio Agüero has hit 254 goals in 370 games for City across nearly a decade of service to the club. Signed from Atletico Madrid in 2011 for £38 million, it rubber-stamped City's credentials as a global superpower when Agüero chose to sign for the Sky Blues over Europe's elites, including Barcelona and Real Madrid, who had shown an interest in him, and within a year he'd already been proven to be worth every penny, as he scored 23 goals in the league, including that famous last-minute winner against QPR to win City their first ever league title in 44 years. Although primarily a predatory striker with quick movements and agility during his first 5 years at the club, Pep Guardiola's arrival at the Etihad Stadium led many to believe that Agüero would depart, but he adapted his game to be more involved in the build-up play without losing his goal-scoring touch, hitting 20-plus goals in Pep's first 4 campaigns at City in all competitions. He has undoubtedly been held back by constant injury setbacks which have seen him just fall short of hitting 300 goals for City by now, but the player with the best goals per game ratio in Premier League history, or at least at some point he was nailed on for a spot in this team. So that's it for the main team, but I'll also provide 7 substitutes and a manager just to round things off very nicely. As backup goalkeeper, I've gone with Joe Corrigan, who gave 16 years of stellar service to the club, being their first choice for 14 of them. For defenders, I've gone with Paul Power as a reserve fullback who could cover in just about any position on the pitch, and Mike Doyle, who was voted as City's hardest ever player about a decade ago, as a substitute centre-back, although if Ruben Diaz can keep up his great form for City for a long time yet to come, I'm sure that he'll take this place in this team somewhere down the line. Providing solidity in midfield, I've gone for Alan Oakes as a backup to the defensive midfielder in Fernandinho and Kevin De Bruyne as a more creative option from the bench. And as annoyed as I was at having to leave Mike Summerby out of this starting team, there's no way he's missing out on a place on the bench, with Francis Lee being entrusted with providing goals from the bench. In terms of players who just missed out, superstars like Yaya Toure, Ken Barnes and Frank Swift, and cult heroes including Sean Gota, George Kinkladze, Asa Hartford, Roy Poole and Pablo Zabaleta were the closest to featuring, but of course the shortlist was quite plentiful. For the man in the dugout, as much as I would love to go with Joe Mercer for transforming City from a second division outfit upon his arrival in 1965 to the dominant force in the English game within the space of 5 years, I think his achievements have just about been overtaken by Pep Guardiola. After a season of adjusting to life in the Premier League, Pep stuck by his principles fervently and led City to become the first ever side to reach 100 points in English football history in 2017-18, before accruing 98 points the next season to make City the first club to retain the Premier League title since 2009, and they currently sit atop the Premier League table by 10 points as of the time of this recording. He's improved the likes of Raheem Sterling, Sergio Agüero, Kevin De Bruyne and Fernandinho immeasurably, and his style of play is, at times, a joy to behold, meaning that he has to go down as City's greatest manager of all time, but don't let that detract from the achievements of Joe Mercer, and of course his capable deputy, Malcolm Allison. That just about wraps up today's video on City's all-time greatest 11 as well as their subs bench and a manager. If you did enjoy this video or think I should have replaced someone with somebody else, let me know what your decisions would be in the comments down below. And whilst you are here, hit the like button if you enjoyed it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And of course there's a little bell to the side of the subscribe button which you can ring and you can get notified whenever I upload a video straight away. Thank you very much for watching and until next time, I'll see you then.